Welcome to Building Stories, the podcast where we tell honest stories about construction and digital transformation. I'm really excited today. Today we have Paul Williams from Simonds Homes, who's with us with a wealth of experience in the construction industry over many years. Paul is passionate. He's a passionate advocate for safety, and he's driven by the desire to ensure that everybody and everybody that enters a construction site gets home safe and unharmed at the end of each day. It's a very, very important thing in our industry. More recently, Paul's brought his skill set to Simonds Homes, where he's the National WHSEQ Manager. Paul, it's a massive pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you. What a lovely introduction. I thought you actually pointed out you were going to be honest, but no, it's been interesting. It's good. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, we'll start at the beginning. I think everyone's really interested to hear a bit more about your background and what's brought you here to this point in safety. So talk to me a bit about your journey in construction. Why did you choose to work in this industry, and how did you get started?
Interesting questions. Fairly convoluted. I'm sure everyone's is, but I started in the pub game. I was a publican in a challenging environment for a long time, and then at some point I burnt out and got out, and then I applied for a position as a filing clerk at the Boxall Institute, and they interviewed me and said, why did you apply for the job? And I said, I'm happy to do something without thinking, because really I'd been burnt out, right? So then they said, well, we're actually thinking about giving you another opportunity in another area. And I said, well, why did you invite me into this space? And they said, well, because of your skill sets, clearly you've got a little bit more to offer. So at that point, I was given an opportunity to look after apprentices in an apprenticeship scheme that the Boxall Institute were a part of. So I guess that was my introduction to safety in a very broad stroke. I didn't know much about it. I was attending all manner of different sites, so hairdressers, I'd be going to, factories, I'd be looking at all sorts of different things. And then from there, one of my clients was the Housing Industry Association, and they had an apprenticeship scheme, and so I was managing that aspect of it. And after dealing with them for some time, I ended up being offered an opportunity, which I refused 3 times, and eventually I did take the job because they had great access to the MCG car park. So that's how I got into it. I took the role at the Housing Industry Association looking after apprentices, and then I ended up moving into the safety department there. I stayed at the HIA for about 8 years. From there, I went to work for a builder, and I was there for a couple of years. Pretty much ended up working for, where did I go from there? I don't know. I did a few things. I ended up sitting at another volume builder called Creation Homes, and I was there for about 8 years. And then I didn't see eye to eye with certain people there, so in the end I just walked. And then I was provided an opportunity to work at Simonds. So I took that opportunity, and I've been here for probably three years now. So I'm in my 4th year. I guess during that time I was chairman of the Victorian Volume Building Safety Alliance for about 5 years. I sat on various committees, as well as being a member of the Foundations for Safety Committee, which is a peak safety body in Victoria, with WorkSafe and CFMEU and all the other unions. I sat also as a member of the volume building group in Queensland, and I developed basically strong relationships with key stakeholders over a long period of time. So I think, fortunately for me, I don't profess to know everything. I certainly don't, but I have a fairly extensive phone book, and I can call people and get assistance where needed. And the way to do that, of course, is to offer help and assistance wherever you can, and so things tend to come back at you, the same way you deliver them, right? So I give myself willingly and freely to this space, and I share all my knowledge freely, because ultimately I want people to go home safe. So that's pretty much how I got into this space. really. Yeah, so that
That's
covers that.
Yeah, that's really really awesome to hear, and as you can see that once you kind of got into safety, there's a real quick sort of sort of rise there into other parts of safety. So take us through that a little bit. What are some of the key moments in your career to date, and why safety? So obviously once you got into it, you moved into that industry space pretty quickly. So what were the drivers around that?
I think probably the main drivers was looking after apprentices and looking at life lessons. So I was in a fortunate position. We would have a group of apprentices, and I'd have to induct them into the space that they are in. It's their first step into the industry. An induction is really important because you set the expectations and the rules, I guess, at the start, and it gives them a head start really in their progression for their career. I used to, talk about other things too, not just safety. It would be, hey, listen, if you're going to be sick, be sick Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Don't have Monday and Fridays off because that's the way the employer is going to look at it. If you're genuinely sick, turn up to work. Your employer is going to send you home, right? And it's not necessarily great advice. And certainly in this day and age, things have changed a little bit. But really, I think attitude is really important, and influencing young people. It was a great opportunity. I mean, I think if we looked at drugs in society, it's a much more accepted practice nowadays than it used to be. So rather than tell the guys, oh, don't do drugs, that's naughty, I just anticipated that they were going to at some point. So I used to try and give them lessons. Look, drugs are bad. If you're going to do them though, for crying out loud, do them Friday night, because you don't want to have anything in your system Monday morning, right? Because if something happens Monday morning and you're involved in an incident, you could be blood tested. If you're, impacted, you could be facing criminal charges, right? So these are some of the things that I used to talk to the kids about. I don't, again, profess to be all-knowing about education and what's appropriate, but that was, from my perspective, probably the best approach. And having an impact on kids. So that was where I sort of decided to get in. And I think if we moved on from that and looked at some of the key moments, I've worked in the medium density space for a while. I've worked with some of the most challenging developers that go out, that they've got, massive processes in place because it's all about, mitigating litigation. And I received an award from Stockland for innovation and safety. I ran programs with on those medium density sites where they were the developer, and it was well received. I'll give you an example of that. We had I was doing a ladder safety program where we had the Minister of Health come out to one of our construction sites. Ended up being a bit of a circus. We had every TV network on site. We had 30 inspectors from WorkSafe turning up. We had all the developers from Stockland, all their management people fly down. And we had this big powwow about ladder safety. And so the minister got to talk about how important safety is. And then all the people in the media circus started asking her about the latest events and the latest dramas from a political sense, and had nothing to do with safety. I got to have my piece, which was immediately cut out from any TV reporting. But the ironic thing was that whilst we were all doing this, we sort of packed everything up. The minister managed to escape, and as she was leaving, about 2 minutes later, I look around and there's a chap working on a ladder unsafely, and I looked at it and I went, this is not going to end well. So I've yelled out, hey, and I'm running up the road trying to catch this guy doing something before he fell, and unfortunately I missed it because he fell, and I had 30 inspectors on site looking at it. So that was a bit funny at the time. Well, it wasn't funny at the time, but it became a bit of a joke afterwards. But it just proves it doesn't matter what sort of environment you set up, things can happen. So, there have been lots of different experiences in the industry. I think probably the most satisfying one is influencing change, right? Which provides not only a safety benefit, but a logical, sustainable outcome for people. So every approach that I have is about how we can do things with as little impact as possible, but create the biggest benefit. Which is why essentially I've been using DS Site, which was formerly CodeSafe, for probably over 10 years.
Yeah, and you know, again, digital tooling is so important when you define a process or a workflow and understand that it needs to be completed, especially in this um, space we're talking about with safety. And so, you know, let's digging into safety a little bit more. Tell me about first how safety has changed over the course of your career, at least since you've been doing safety. I mean, we're all very aware that over the years, safety has really transitioned. It was something that was extremely important and glaring from, you know, there's a lot of accidents, a lot of fatalities, a lot of lack of focus and lack of compliance, and industry bodies and governmental bodies came in to try and put frameworks around that, so that businesses can follow that as well. And now we, you know, as you touched on earlier, we've ended up in a position where, you know, litigation ends up sort of being more important. And do you see that as success in the industry now that there's a big focus on, you know, getting the task done correctly? Has the industry sort of got into a place where we've made a really good cut on fatalities and injuries, and it's now around more sort of controlling?
Uh, yeah, look, I think that's a fairly large question. I think if I looked at the first part of that, one of the things that's probably changed is when I went to site when I was much younger, I would experience angst. I would experience, challenges from trades that thought they knew better. There's a lot of stereotypes out there, with a safety person coming up with a manual, looking at it saying, it's not done this way, it's meant to be done this way. And, having the trade who's been doing it for 25 years look at you like you're a waste of their time. The abuse that, and I've copped, over the journey, those sorts of things don't happen so much now. There's still an element of ignorance that exists, but generally those are the people you weed out of your business. So if I was to confront, I know it happened last year, I asked a guy to get down off the roof. He was working without fall protection and his attitude was, mate, I've been doing this for years, don't tell me how to do it. And I went,
Yeah,
okay, well, that's cool, but you'll have your safe work method statement and it should detail how you do your job safely, right? And he goes, I haven't had a swim ever, mate. I don't know what you're talking about. So, this is a company or a chap that's working for a company that we've engaged in our business. Now, my business doesn't employ idiots. So essentially, rather than get too engaged in it because it was firing up, I just simply walked away. I gave the guy my advice. It's probably not safe to do what you're doing. In fact, it's not safe. You should get down. I wasn't going to get involved in any heavy arguments, so I walked away from that and I rang up his director and I just explained to him what was going on, and this is how his staff was acting on site. That person was contacted shortly after that. The man got down, left site, and subsequently no longer works for that company. Now, that wasn't my approach. They asked me what I'd like to do with this situation. I said, I think the guy needs some education. So rather than terminate his employment, give him an opportunity to learn and improve. I'm not going to hold it against you guys. I'll issue a non-compliance, but ultimately we need people to be educated in this space. The guy, unfortunately, was ignorant and not interested in learning and told the employer to go and get stuffed and left. So people like that are leaving the industry. What we have now is people that are more willing to listen. There's an acceptance that safety is an integral part of the operation. I think there's still businesses that think safety is an evil necessary or necessity, an evil necessity. That, and again, changing that narrative is really important, and you can only do that by making it easy for people to change, right? So, a lot of what I do is to try and help the little people because the little people become big people, right? And those big people can have an influence. So, getting in front of young people, apprentices, making changes in that space is great.
yes.
But in supporting them when they tell their bosses, hey, you shouldn't do it this way because the boss is going to have a crack at them, giving them the tools to be able to show their boss, no, here's the evidence. This is why we don't do what you're suggesting, and having resources available at your fingertips is a significant change to the industry. So I think where the industry is heading is positive.
Yeah.
I think we've got a long way to go. What I will say is this: if people listen to me every time, I'd never have a job. So from that sense, I'm glad people don't listen to me, because I'm still employed and can provide for my family. But I would like to see that there are more people going home uninjured as a result of the work that we're doing.
Of course, and I think that's what is so crucial with safety, right? There's many processes and workflows in construction that are very, very important. Obviously, you need designs to be able to actually build a building, but safety is just one of those, self-preservation and looking after the people that are on site every day, and understanding that they have families, understanding that they have commitments, and even in an example that you gave, I'm sure the people that are connected to that bloke that was on the roof will probably come up and say the same thing that you said, like, come on, mate, listen, you want to get home at the end of the day. So, in that sort of similar theme, it might be really good to give us an idea of the major parts of safety, provision of information, inductions, and swim adherence. Talk to us a little bit about those three areas and why they are so important to the safety life cycle, essentially.
So inductions, swims, and what was the other one? Sorry.
Provision of information. So things like toolbox talks and making
Yep.
sure people have access to that.
All right. Well, so that's my basic philosophy, right? Everything I do is based on education. It's sharing information, educating the people that need to be educated, and then documenting it really to provide evidence that you've gone about doing it. I think that's the biggest change for me, is being able to do that and have that information readily available to, and it not being difficult to complete. So an induction is super important because, as I said earlier, teaching someone or talking to people about, what they're expected before they do it means that when they do it wrong, they're not going to be surprised when they get asked to address it and change it, right? So just to give you an example, even outside of safety, I recently ran a tour up into the high country with 10 four-wheel drive vehicles, and before we did that, we had a toolbox, and I got everyone together and I said, hey, here are some of the rules about what we're doing. I need your lights on, I need you to check your corners, I need you to do all the things that we need to do. I need you to be safe, I need you to look after the environment, I don't want people throwing stuff out the windows. That rule and those basic standards sets the standard for the rest of the trip. So people have a level of expectation. Sometimes, depending on how you deliver it, I mean, I did have people say to me after the event, gee, we weren't sure, it sounded like a bit of a strict trip, but in the end, it was a fantastic trip and everyone had a great time. You have to be balanced with your approach. Because I'm a safety person, I probably took the approach a little bit too seriously. But, for me, the induction states everything that you need at the start. So if I have to look back at someone and say, listen, we spoke about alcohol consumption, we spoke about, if you've got problems with alcohol, don't be drinking on site. You know what I mean? Those are all not on site, on the trip. I don't want to have to deal with aggressive people. This is a throwback from my time as a publican, right? So I've experienced every aspect of people, from lovely people, at the first stubby that they've had, and by the 10th stubby, they're violent and aggressive, and I'm not interested in dealing with it on a trip. But again, set the standards early, and that's how it happens. So your safe work method statement is a ultimately is a document that reinforces that. It gives you the task that they're performing. It sets out, the worst things that can happen. And then it sets out the third thing, which is essentially how you stop that from happening by putting in your controls, right? Mm-hmm. Having that is a basic document that I can point at. So if you've got the induction, you're expecting to turn up with the swims, they turn up with the swims, they now act in an inappropriate way, I can look at the swims and say, here it says you're going to do it this way. You failed to act the way you told me you were going to act. It's not my fault anymore, it's yours. Right? So that's the other benefit, clearly, is that people get to understand what it is that they do and how they do it safely. That's the key focus. For me, I use it different ways, but of course, it's all about the education and the information contained within the swims is integral to a positive return.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as builders, it's what you're trying to make sure that everybody that's on your sites is safe. And based on what you said, you would see inductions as a way to verify that and monitor that. And the industry, not at large, but in certain pockets, would see things like an induction as a tick box exercise. But going back over the conversation we've just had, it's a verification that the right information has been provided, that you are armed on site with what you need to keep yourself safe. And again, this is the same statement: get home safely at the end of the day. So
Yep.
in that theme, talk to me about what inductions look like right now. What works, what doesn't work, and how it could be better, essentially.
Well, I think if you looked at the construction industry I can't remember the specific date. It might have been 1998 or something. Anyway, inductions came in. They released the red card, or the construction induction card. At that time, you needed that card to get into the industry. So the information that was contained in those learning courses, people did it once. And they might have a card that says, I was inducted in 2001. Well, now we're in 2025. That's been 24 years since the person's had an induction from a construction induction perspective. The issue, I think, with the induction process is because it's so important, having the ability to update it and have an ability to share new information, for example, like silica or new regulations around fall from heights, if there's some changes in that space, or you need to be able to send that information out quickly to everybody, because not everyone goes home and looks up at the WorkSafe website to see what the latest information is, which is ultimately one of the things that drove me to make some changes as an industry to the induction process, because we want to share relevant information. And I want to say relevant, construction's construction, but there are several parts of that. We've got commercial construction, which has a static environment with people are managing it and policing it. And then we have the residential sector, which is vastly different, because we have limited resources available. We have one supervisor that's in charge of between 15 and up to 30 jobs, depending on the nature of the business that he's working for. And those people need to, I guess, have a better say in what happens and the rules that they're expecting to enforce, to the trade. So a residential induction made a lot of sense to me. I didn't certainly replace the white card or the red card of the stone, or it just supplemented it. So we now have more information available to us in the induction, and we've gone about setting it up so that we can get multiple people inducted, and it doesn't take a long time. And what we want are the right people being inducted. So we don't want companies having an administrative person set up to do all the inductions for their team. We want the individuals in that team to be able to complete the induction. So previously what was happening, companies like my company, like other companies, bigger builders, would send out quite a lengthy induction process that would take 45 minutes to an hour to complete. There are going to be individuals out there that don't have the skill sets to sit down for that length of time and go through the induction process appropriately, but that business needs to be able to generate wealth. So what they do is they'll send their guys out, and then they'll put someone in that seat to do the induction on behalf of that worker. So what we're doing here is we're not actually targeting the person that needs the education. And what I wanted to do was make the induction simple, but also provide resources available. So if a 17 or 16-year-old apprentice is being told by his boss, no, you need to bump fire, you need to do it this way. I've got a video that's provided as part of the induction that shows you what you can and can't do with a nail gun.
Mm.
So that person will now have an opportunity to say to his boss, no, I don't feel comfortable doing it this way, and here's the reason.
Mm.
We're trying to support people make better decisions.
Yeah, and some of those themes you brought up there as well, where you've got site managers having to manage multiple sites, admin teams, circumventing the inductions process, and the real basis of what it's for, like you just said, is to make sure the person operating or doing a task understands exactly how to do that safely. And so, clearly to help site managers out, things like digital tooling comes into play, where they're able to quite easily and on the go manage and look at different inductions, who is and who isn't inducted. And digital platforms typically, a great place to be able to provide information, especially information that's updated as well. And so you mentioned just before, residential induction card. And so the RIC card, or the RIC card initiative, has been something that's been growing in Victoria for a little while. And I know it's something that you're a part of. So take us through that a little bit and give us more information. So what is RIC, and why is it such a big change for the industry off the back of what you were just saying, obviously?
Yeah, I think so. About 12 years ago, I was sitting on a committee, the Victorian Volume Building Safety Alliance. And in that meeting, I raised the question of inductions because someone I'd gone out and seen had said, look, Paul, I have to go and do inductions for Creation Homes. I have to do inductions for Burbank. I have to do inductions for Metricon. I've got 150 workers. I have to do 150 inductions each time I go to a new builder. I deal with over 20 builders. This is not sustainable, but it was a requirement. So every volume builder who had an OH&S management team in place would enforce these regulations on to the trades. The trades would, needing the money, be forced to actually do something about it. So that's where they started employing administrative people to assist.
Mm-hmm.
They were losing that game. It was cost prohibitive. The right people weren't getting the information. I took that question and I said, it's a great question. I don't understand the logic behind it either. There must be a reason for it. So I approached the volume building group at the time. Now, I was only relatively new at that stage. And what came back was that, no, we can't do that, Paul, because none of the builders are going to agree on what's important to have in that document, because each individual builder is going to want to have their little bit. Each lawyer of each company is going to say, oh, no, I need you to mention this, or, oh, I need you to mention this, right? So at the time, it was shelved. It was too hard basket. And I just consistently worked at it. Unfortunately for me, I left the volume building chair position a couple of years back, and Frank Piconti took over from me. It was voted in by the group, and his attitude and mine are very similar. So we sat down with Kevin Moroney from Metricon over a lunch one day and tried to work out, how can we improve the industry? How can we improve what we currently do and get the induction into the hands of the people that need it? And we thought, we have the tool now because I've been using DS Site for a long time. I shared that with Frank. Frank could see the advantages that he picked up and started using it as well. And collectively, we decided that we can put something together that works.
Mm-hmm.
We can get all our legal teams to look at it, and everyone that's looked at it so far has been happy with the content.
Mm-hmm.
We ran it through. I ran it through HIA. I ran it through the master builders, and I ran it through some people at WorkSafe, and everyone's of the same opinion. We're trying to change something in the industry that's not fantastic, and we can make it better. We have their blessing. It's not to replace the white card, but it's going to supplement it, as I mentioned earlier. So, with that, that change became a reality. And I think the best part about this is that whilst I'm going to benefit from it because it makes the induction process significantly easier. The real winners are going to be all the smaller builders that work really hard but can't afford a safety team. And so we're going to be sharing key information with these people that they get access to so that they are going to be meeting their obligations for compliance around education and training. I'm excited about that because there are a lot of people out there that want to do it the right way but just can't afford it.
Yeah. It's a big piece of work, and the importance of it on all the different levels we've mentioned, it means it's something that you can't ignore. And so industry coming to the table the way you've just mentioned is a huge win. It's probably the biggest win. It's the validation that this can be standardized, and then taking that value not just from making inductions and safety easier, but again making barrier to entry much lower, which increases the likelihood that people on sites across Australia really are going to have a pretty low impact way to get on board and have confidence that not only are they inducted and compliant, but also have access to the information. And so is RIC the new way forward, for site inductions? Talk to us a little bit about what you see for RIC growing forward. We've obviously got the volume home builders and a small collection right now have said yes, and there's work going into putting it out into industry. But how do you see that growing?
So I think there's already several builders that are very keen to jump on because they don't have robust induction systems currently themselves. There's a lot of companies that are doing paper-based inductions, which is nothing wrong with, but it's a little bit archaic in this day and age of technology. So I see this, and can I just point out, this is in its infancy stages. I'd say what we have at the moment is a conceptual development product. It's working currently in its format, but the opportunities for improvement are dramatic. I see, for example, we currently have our induction processes in English, and I've got an opportunity for, if people want it in a different language, they simply contact us. I can get the information translated and then send it out to them so that they still have the information provided, but it'll be in their language. I see the development happening in that space where an AI model gets involved and says, right, what language would you like? I want it in Arabic, Malay, Chinese, Arabic, Hindi, and then he hits that button, and then everything we have on that induction process becomes available to the people that we're targeting. Language is a massive barrier, but in the OH&S Act, there are sections there that dictate that you must not have language as a barrier. Safety is available to everyone of every language background. So, I think that's a significant opportunity for the development of the app. If we put it into that space, could you imagine doing an induction and put it this way, if you went to China and you had to do an induction and they give it to you a piece of paper in Mandarin, you got no chance. Absolutely no chance. You'll tick what you think you need to and sign down the bottom. You wouldn't have read and understood anything. If someone made an effort to put it in English, I'd be grateful. The thing here is that I wouldn't be. I'd be expecting it. But people that come from a different background are fighting this all the time. So if we could develop it and make it easier, then that for me is where it really becomes exciting. And I'll be sharing my safety stories with these people in multiple language, and that gets me excited. If I can get someone to go home that may not necessarily get home, if he didn't have the education, I'd be delighted.
Yeah, exactly. And I think diverse workforces are a big part of what makes the world go around. And I think keeping that in mind and providing tooling to do that it's extremely important. And being this is where something like the residential induction card is quite exciting, because getting to that point of standardization across the industry then allows you to look at something like multi-language support, right? I think when you have so many different induction processes and you've got businesses self-managing those or managing them with a lot of admin overhead, something like, multi-language support becomes an afterthought, because it's something you just can't look at. It's just too far off in the distance. So, Rick bringing a standardization to the industry, I think is such a huge win. Moving, as you just mentioned, now moving into sort of the SME businesses that are on sites and the trade owners as well. How is Rick making their life easier? I know one thing that jumps out to me about Rick is that you go from multiple inductions down to just one card. Maybe start with that. Talk to us a little bit about how life has changed for the business owner, but also for the tradie on site, potentially moving between 2 or 3 different sites over the course of a month.
Yeah, so I think, like we said, there's the business that had 150 people. For them now, they're going to save time and money, and they're all very excited about it. The next question, of course, is that they ask, well, okay, Paul, how do I monitor my trades, my employees that have signed up to your RIC card? That's an opportunity, and that's the opportunity for for DSI, for example, to provide a solution that's affordable to these businesses, to say, hey, how many guys have I got? Oh, I can see, 10% haven't actually completed the induction yet. So let's get onto that, and we can address that. And then by using that tool, I guess you open the door for opportunities, because someone's going to say, well, why can't we use that for our management of our trucks? Why can't we have an induction process for our vehicles? Why can't we? Well, hell, here is a solution for, everything. I can put a QR code on my truck as I get in, and I go, okay, here's the operational manual that's, now available on a QR code. So, I get excited about how can I, share the opportunities that we're going to experience by getting everyone on the RIC card, because people are now going to go, well, I want to see how I can manage my staff using, the DS site, which is the format that we're using the RIC card induction on. And now that they've seen this as a soft induction into the RIC card or the DS site, they now get an opportunity to improve their business and start providing, more education from that end to the end user, which is their trades that they engage. So now I can go onto site and say to the operator, hey, where's your manual for your excavator? Because, that's a requirement. You need to have that. Where is it? Here's my QR code. Please scan that. Here it is. So, there's so many benefits right across the industry for this. It's not just like the inductions for me is everything, right? I reckon this is gold. But the ability to run toolbox meetings, the ability to run training and education, and also, to have compliance. Hey man, you failed. This is not good what you're doing. I'm going to issue with a non-compliance. Fill out the forms on the spot right now. Emails it automatically to the business that I'm talking to. This creates a professional environment where there is a process in place. So if anyone wants to question me on that process, they can, and I'll be able to provide the answers. And that in what I do is so important. When you can, sorry to go off on a tangent here, I'll give you an example. I ran an induction on site. Part of that induction was with a group of Afghani chaps who none of them spoke English, but their boss did. So I sat down with the boss and I went through verbatim, and I asked him to translate. So we did. Then we had a visual interpretation of a safe work method statement. So I was able to show them a video of the things that they need to do safely. I then ran a toolbox meeting on nail gun safety, and then after that I did a toolbox meeting on circular saws. Two of the guys that were there were brothers. One was operating a nail gun, the other one was operating a circular saw. One of them one day shot himself in the hand with the nail gun, and the next day the other brother sliced his leg open, missing his femoral artery by about 2 mil. When WorkSafe turned up to investigate the situation, because clearly we had 2 significant incidents, in a period of 1 day or 24 hours, they asked me to provide the education that I had provided these people that came to site as contractors, because they were deemed employees. and I was able to provide them the toolbox meetings specifically relating to the incidents that they had.
Yeah.
So these guys both signed that they would operate safely, that they would, use the equipment appropriately, and that they would only operate it if they were relevantly trained. They agreed to all of that. They'd signed off on it. They watched the safety videos. I had done everything that I could possibly do. In the end, the WorkSafe inspector said, you've met your obligations. You've done a great job, and then left. He did approach the company and asked for their training records, but certainly in my position, I was able to provide them, and there was no more emphasis on prosecuting me. It was more turning now back onto the trade.
Yes.
So these are the things that you can do with it. Just Rick is just the first step in a massive opportunity.
Yeah, 100%, right. I think being able to show up to any volume home builder and show your RIC card and not have to do it multiple times, it just means that you've got a higher chance of making sure people are inducted. Then, the platform that's managing all of this, filling that platform up with all of the supporting information for trades to take ownership, that's, like you mentioned, that the next exciting wave as well. And you mentioned DSR a couple of times, and that's really what we're trying to do is provide that information off the shelf, right? And whilst it's a really strong free-form form builder where you have a lot of malleability to bring in so many different processes that are happening in your business, the main core of it though is that off the shelf you've got inductions, incident work reports, you've got different types of worker inductions, you've got SWMS uploads, these key areas that make sure that you stay compliant from a safety perspective and that you start to take ownership. And so in that situation that you spoke about now, it's awesome to see industry get to a point where you were able to have your businesses back. But the change in the industry is we see the trade also wanting to have the same thing. We see the trade also wanting to adhere to the same thing, and providing the right tooling. And obviously taking that ownership is always going to come down to the individual or the business to do. And like you said, you can't help people that don't want to help themselves, or businesses that don't want to help themselves. But for the ones that do, it's a really exciting time in the industry. A lot of things are coming to this space. And I think, being able to sort of launch it through something like the Residential Induction Card is very, very exciting. Awesome. I think, a little bit off brand, Jack, you can probably cut this out. Anything else you want to go to on the RIC card that you feel like we might have missed?
There'll probably be heaps of things. I think it's I think once the industry, probably mentioned this to you yesterday, but I think once the industry adopts this and accepts it as the standard, the opportunity to influence industry quickly by sending push notifications via their phones to individual trades or targeted trades. So carpenters, for example, someone who has chosen the carpentry field as part of the RIC card, we could then send updates about, different techniques, about, installation processes for posi struts, or, the use of nail guns for certain areas. We will be able to target, individual groups of trades with the latest information. We'll be able to send information to bricklayers about the way you should, avoid silica dust, and making sure that they've been given that information. And it's not just me sending it out to my business. This will be me sending an alert via a committee that's formed, that looks at the information and says, yes, that's appropriate to send out. That committee then sends out the information nationally, right? So we are now targeting thousands of people in a particular sector with key information, and not belting people that are bricklayers about carpentry issues, and vice versa. Again, you're only limited by, the depth of knowledge that you have in that particular thing. But if you really, I think, I don't know. I'm just excited about what we can do with this, right? So I think it's important that we get everyone on board first, secure a solid standard, and then once everyone has the expectations that this is the industry standard, the opportunities for educating suppliers and the key stakeholders in those people that turn up, is amazing. Like, I will go see I'll provide a toolbox meeting for a carpentry crew, right? So there'll be maybe 4 or 5 guys. 3 of those guys are apprentices. 2 of those guys, one of them's an owner or a director, and one of them's a senior person within that business. Now, they'll go out and do their work. I'll sit there and run a toolbox meeting with them, and when I'm talking to them about the toolbox meeting, I'll be going, hey, you can do this. This is what you need to do. Watch out for ladders because they're dangerous too. I'm now influencing the 3 apprentices that are there, and I'm now saying to those 3 apprentices, when you become a boss one day, you will need to be able to provide evidence to your team that you've met your obligations to safety, and here is the tool that you do it with. And I'm sharing it with them. That's yours. You can use that whenever you like. We're sharing safety because it's free.
Yeah.
Those people will become opportunities for their site to be able to increase the person's individual business's capacity.
Yes.
And that's where you will capture a significant market that currently no one has.
Yeah.
That's whether you edit that out, I don't care. That's just a message that I wanted to share, right? So how we run this out is super important. And I think the industry will benefit. I think your business model will be appreciated by local authorities nationally. So we've got WorkSafe, Safe Work in Queensland, Safe Work New South Wales, etc. All those businesses, when they understand what you guys are doing and how you're contributing to the market, will be opening the door for other sectors of different industries, not just construction.
Yes.
But think about the opportunities that you have moving forward to deal with static environments like factories. When we have machinery where we need to have evidence that the person who's operating that machinery, has got education on what to do in the event of an emergency, or how to operate that machine before they start. Even a simple 10-second video. Don't forget, hit that button, do this, don't put your fingers in there. Those sorts of things will also reduce, incidents, but also help the business defend itself when something does happen and someone does turn up to work because they've been fatigued after a big weekend. That they've got some level of training that supports the business.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliantly said, Ryan, and it segues us really well into the final part of this, which is talking about the future. And I think what's really exciting about the future is that industry has made these big leaps over the years. First from standards, first from addressing safety in general, then from standards adherence, and then through digital, first wave of digital tooling. And then now standardization through digital tooling, something like the RIC. And it just feels like, there's a partnership kind of going on that's just taking away more and more barriers. And especially when you're focusing on something like safety, the outcomes will just be so much better. And so, give us a quick sort of, what do you see for the future of site safety in residential construction? Where do you see in 5 years' time? We would love to be at this space in safety.
I think AI is going to play a massive part in construction. I think that there's going to be cameras used with AI technology and capacity that will be able to oversee a construction site and send alerts to people saying, hey, there's someone operating on your site unsafely. The supervisor is going to be able to react to that, make a phone call to someone and say, hey, buddy, I can see you're working unsafely on site. Is there any reason why you're working up there without fall protection? Can you please stop? That's a preventative thing. Having the technology in place, where it would normally be resourced, and you'd have to have someone sitting there watching it, which is totally impractical. And then you could do that for 9 days straight, and it's the 10th day the guy yawns that you missed the thing that's happened. So this is where AI is going to have a massive impact. I think getting on board early in this space and influencing positive change to one of Australia's greatest domestic products, which is the residential sector, is mind-blowing, right? It's a responsibility that you have, that we have, to get it right, because if we stuff this up, reputations are soiled. It'll go back to the old ways very quickly. There's lots of people that want to see things like this fail because they're not the ones running it, right? It's human nature. There's people that are jealous and envious. We want to get this right. Again, I don't profess to have everything spot on. I've worked hard to try and achieve what we've got to this point. I think there are probably better systems out there, like more things that we could do. I may not have considered everything, but I reckon we will improve quickly once there's a mass adoption. And that adoption's coming. I've just been holding off on it whilst we iron out the little bugs, but there's people knocking on the door. They want in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we at Deep Space are very excited to be involved in championing, the Residential Induction Card. I think it's a great platform to be able to do it on. It's a passion that we all share in construction as well. It's something that we see the passion in the likes of yourselves and in industry, and moving away from the standardization and AI and tech. It's that ability to have an impact on whether people go home at the end of the day or not, I think is extremely important work. And if you have an ability to impact that, then it should be, you should go there with all guns blazing. And so now, thank you, Paul, so much. And I think on that note, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you and hearing about your vision for safety and some of the great initiatives that you're championing, like the Residential Induction Card. Really thank you a lot for joining us today and taking the time out. Really hope to have you back soon to share what would be more success and more insights around how the RIC initiative is growing. Don't forget to grab this podcast from where you receive all your favorite podcasts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.